In our pursuit of humanities for the past several weeks, I've noticed this overarching question that has come up time and time again, this theme of what does it mean to be human? And perhaps the best way to answer that is through an anthology, to tell the story of how we have defined ourselves as ourselves. And perhaps by understanding these principles, we can become more connected to the people around us, to the environment we live in. The three objects that I chose were the statue of Khafre enthroned, Marcus Aurelius' book Meditations, and the Roman Pantheon. We'll examine three ways that these all intend to answer this question of what it means to be human. To start off, we see how understanding our place in the cosmos is one of the ways that we prove to be human. In the statue of Khafre, which I chose simply because of this overwhelming sense of being at peace that comes from the statue, without even taking a second to really analyze it, we get an idealized depiction of a ruler that has not much of a bearing to the realistic interpretation, which is on purpose because this was not a representation of specifically King Khafre, but what he represented again, and how that would last so much longer than just one man would. And as a ruler, which so many people believed in, we see this indirect connection between an order between people and an order between the king. Marcus Aurelius' book Meditations also comes from the perspective of a ruler. In fact, Aurelius was a Roman emperor, and these were his personal writings. So it's not strange that he focused on what could be the ideal ruler. But more than that, in book 3 of Meditations, there's a section in which Aurelius describes his connection with nature, where he highlights the charm, the attractiveness of loaves of bread splitting open the top of the oven, ripe figs of olives falling, on and on and on about this beauty. And just before that, in another section, he mentions how important it is for us to continue learning, to continue understanding and observing such phenomena. And I chose to include this piece because it stuck with me a lot, probably the most out of all of the objects and texts that we've analyzed the most here. Lastly, we see this also in the Roman, and while this also blends in a little bit into the balance of human and divine, we see this structure and how much of a universal feeling we get, how inclusive it feels to see oculus, to look up, to gaze at stars unbeknownst to mankind. It surely showcases our place in this cosmos and their place in this universe. In fact, that's the very reason why I included this on my list. It's because it's such a beautiful place, and to experience that myself is a dream of mine, which hopefully I'll be able to realize in the near future. Secondly, these pieces answer this question of humanity in the pursuit of legacy. Again, we already talked about this idealized representation of a king, and no doubt that rolls over to this idea as well, to create such a perfect representation of the things that we believe in, of our morals, of how we believe rulers should lead, and to have that last for eternity is not as hard as it would be to make the memory of one person, of one mere man, to last. With Aurelius, again, he does focus a lot on this ideal ruler, but in conjunction with the other two objects, it helps us peel back and realize there's another focus on this philosophic virtue, to focus on upholding one's morality, and to even find that morality and not have it defined by those around us. How in conjunction, understanding that the permanence of this world versus the semi-permanence of us is a direct connection with understanding what we can do to make our own legacy. As for today, the fact that the Pantheon is still standing is testament to this fact, this answer of the question of humanity. It's monumental for certain that so many people, even more than 1,000 years later, want to visit the Roman Pantheon, including myself, and no doubt those that commissioned it, no doubt those that worked on the Pantheon when it was built would be proud to know how long it's lasted. And lastly, we'll look at how understanding the balance between the divine or spirituality ourselves is an answer to this question of what it means to be. Referencing King Khafre again, his figure again is very representative of an ideal, and it's almost godlike, but however there's still some human aspects to it. And in fact, this shows this straddling of the line between the human, divine, ultimately giving us this sense of a lifelong struggle, not a negative sense, but a struggle to look for that answer, to find that balance between our own connection with spirituality and ourselves. Aurelius also does something similar, and in fact, in the last section of the excerpt we annotated, Aurelius mentions this acceptance that just because you may not believe in God does not mean that you will find purity, that you won't find serenity, that you won't find acceptance in what you do. Instead, it's more about finding our own path and staying true to it, something that would have been preposterous maybe 200 or 300 years ago this time. And lastly, we even see how this is influenced in the construction of the pantheon, how it honors not just one god, not just two, but all of the gods, that it honors this spiritual connection between a man-made structure and the oculus, how it looks up to something that man could never create, at least not in our physical capacities. And to conclude, we want to ask why this even matters. All of us are looking for a purpose in life, and in fact, understanding that it's a different answer for each and every one of us is quite free. And that's exactly why my anthology mattered, because we understand that we need to be free. And to be free, we might need to understand ourselves, and just doing so without the guidance of those who lived before us. Why I chose this theme was not just because something that came up multiple times when I was studying the unit material, also because I think it's one of the most important questions that we can ask ourselves that not a lot of us spend a lot of time asking ourselves. It's so important that we understand our belief system fully, and if that's going to give us the life that we want. And doing so felt very powerful to understand how there was such a connection, and such a universal and very specific connection between these different mediums of art, between these different pieces of our history. And it might have been obvious, but I did work from the earliest to the latest just because I just felt more orderly doing so. Ultimately, I realized that I need to continue taking time to understand what I believe and how that influences my interaction with people, how that interacts with other people, because there is power, and to understand that there is power in believing to leave something behind and to continue this pursuit of learning is also very, very interesting, and something that I'm going to take with me, hopefully, for the rest of my life.